Naya dropped her mother's hand and ran straight toward the man in the pilot uniform. Jane's heart stopped. No, not him. Not here. Not after 6 months of silence. Before she could reach her daughter, before she could pull her back, Naya's voice cut through the busy airport terminal like a knife. "Excuse me, you're the man who ghosted my mom after the first date." Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. And Min Jun, the decorated pilot who'd vanished without a trace after one perfect night, stared down at the 7-year-old girl, whose eyes were filling with tears. "You broke my mom's heart," Naya said, her voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. "She waited for you to call, every single day, and you never answered." Jane couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because standing there, healthy and whole and very much alive, was the man she'd convinced herself must be dead to explain the silence, which meant he'd chosen to disappear, chosen to ignore her calls, chosen to break her heart and her daughter's heart, like it meant nothing. Min Jun's face went pale. His lips parted like he was about to explain, about to say something that would make it all make sense. But what could he possibly say after 6 months of ghost-level silence that would justify the way Naya was crying in the middle of an airport, calling him out for abandoning them? What happens when the man you thought was different turns out to be exactly like every other man who walked away? And what could possibly make a decorated pilot disappear after the perfect first date, only to show up 6 months later looking like he'd seen a ghost himself? Besties, this one has a 7-year-old publicly dragging a grown man in an airport. 6 months of brutal silence after the perfect first date. A single mom who thought she'd finally found the one. And a truth so dark, it'll make you understand why some secrets are kept locked away. You're going to feel every ounce of Jane's heartbreak. You're going to fall in love with Naya's unfiltered boldness. And you're absolutely going to need tissues when the real reason for the ghosting comes out. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready for a love story that breaks before it heals. And let's get into it. Naya Meeks was 7 years old when she decided her mother needed a husband. And like most things, Naya decided she wasn't taking no for an answer. "Mommy," she said one Tuesday morning, legs swinging from the kitchen stool as Jane packed lunchboxes. "Why don't I have a daddy?" Jane's hand stilled over the sandwich she was making. They'd had this conversation before, in smaller doses, gentler questions. But there was something different in Naya's voice today. Determination, maybe. Or worse, hope. "Baby, we've talked about this." "No, you talked and I listened. Now I want to talk and you listen." Naya crossed her arms, looking far too serious for someone wearing pigtails and a shirt with a cartoon cat on it. "All my friends have daddies. Maya's daddy picks her up from school. Jin Ah's daddy teaches her piano. Even Sarah has a daddy, and he lives in America, and only visits sometimes. But at least she has one." Jane set down the butter knife and turned to face her daughter fully. This conversation had been coming for a while. She knew that. Naya was smart, observant, and she asked questions that made grown adults uncomfortable. "Your daddy left before you were born, sweetie. He made a choice not to be in our lives." "Why?" "Because some people aren't ready to be parents." "Was he scared?" "I don't know what he was, but I know he's missing out on knowing the most amazing little girl in the world." Naya considered this, her small face thoughtful. Then she slid off the stool and walked over to Jane, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. "It's okay, Mommy. We don't need him anyway. We can find a better daddy. A daddy who actually wants us." Jane's heart cracked and mended in the same breath. She knelt down to Naya's level, cupping her daughter's face. "Baby, it's not that simple." "Why not? You're pretty and you're nice, and you make the best food in all of Seoul. Any man would be lucky to have you, "Naya, I'm serious, Mommy. We just have to look." And look they did. Or rather, Naya looked, while Jane ran a successful catering business and tried very hard to pretend she wasn't lonely. Drillin' Soul Catering had been Jane's dream, her baby, before Naya came along and became her whole world. She'd moved to Seoul 5 years ago, pregnant and determined to start fresh somewhere no one knew her story. Korea had been random, a dart thrown at a map, but it had become home. Her fusion cuisine, mixing Southern soul food with Korean flavors, had been a gamble that paid off. Now she had a steady stream of clients, a small but dedicated staff, and a reputation for making magic happen at events. What she didn't have was time for dating, or more accurately, courage for it. Her friends tried. Soo-jin from the restaurant supply company was constantly trying to set her up with her husband's colleagues. Maya's mom had a brother who was perfect. Really, you'd love him. Even her own mother called from Atlanta every Sunday, with suggestions about putting yourself out there. Jane's answer was always the same polite no, delivered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Until Naya started her campaign in earnest. "Mommy, Soo-jin called. She wants to know if you're free Friday night. She has someone she wants you to meet." "I'm busy Friday." "No, you're not. I checked your calendar." "Naya." "Mommy, you can't find me a daddy if you never go out." The logic was sound, even if it came from a 7-year-old, and the hope in Naya's eyes was hard to resist. So Jane said yes to a blind date with some friend of Soo-jin's husband, a banker with good prospects and a nice smile. Or so Soo-jin promised. Naya was thrilled in that pure, unfiltered way only children could be. She helped Jane pick out a dress, gave a solemn thumbs up to her makeup, and waved her off at the door like she was sending her daughter to prom instead of the other way around. The date was a disaster. Not the obvious kind, not the type where the man showed up late or drunk or nothing like his photos. No, this was the subtle kind of terrible, the kind where everything looked fine on the surface but felt wrong underneath. He talked about himself for 40 minutes straight. He ordered for her, without asking what she wanted. And when she mentioned Naya, when her whole face lit up the way it always did when she talked about her daughter, he'd smiled that patronizing smile and said, "Single mothers are so strong. All that baggage, and you still manage to smile." Baggage. He'd called her daughter baggage. Jane deleted his number before the appetizers arrived. She made it through dinner with practiced politeness, the same smile she used for difficult clients, and left the moment it was socially acceptable. She stopped at a convenience store on the way home and bought Naya's favorite snacks, chocolate pepero sticks and honey butter chips, a consolation prize for hope that was about to be crushed. Naya was still awake when Jane got home, curled up on the couch in her pajamas, pretending to watch TV, but clearly waiting. "Mommy!" She jumped up, eyes bright. "How was it? Did you have fun? Is he nice? When can I meet him?" Jane handed over the snacks and sat down, pulling Naya into her lap. "Baby, I don't think we'll be seeing him again." Naya's face fell. Her shoulders slumped. For a moment, she looked exactly like what she was, a little girl who'd gotten her hopes up and had them crushed. But then, because she was Naya, and she was made of tougher stuff than most adults Jane knew, she lifted her chin. "Well, it's his loss, Mommy. A better daddy will come. We just have to keep looking." Jane held her daughter close and wondered, not for the first time, how she'd gotten so lucky. 3 weeks later, Jane got the call that would change everything, though she didn't know it yet. "Seoul and Soul Catering. This is Jane." "Ms. Meeks, this is Park Min-seo. I'm calling about catering for my wedding next month. Your company came highly recommended." Jane grabbed her planner. I'd be happy to discuss options with you. When's the wedding? The wedding was big, the budget generous, and the bride had excellent taste. Jane spent 2 weeks perfecting the menu, a careful balance of Korean and Southern flavors that would surprise and delight. Fried chicken with gochujang glaze, mac and cheese with kimchi, collard greens cooked in doenjang. It was her best work. The wedding was on a Saturday in June, warm but not sweltering, with a breeze that carried the scent of roses from the venue's garden. Jane arrived early with her staff, setting up the catering station with military precision. Everything had to be perfect. She was in her element here, directing her team, tasting sauces, and adjusting presentations. This was her domain, and she ruled it well. The guests started arriving around 5, a mix of Korean and international attendees, everyone dressed to impress. Jane barely noticed them, too focused on ensuring each plate that left her station was flawless. She didn't notice the group of pilots who walked in together, sharp in their suits, laughing about something one of them had said. She didn't notice when one of them, taller than the rest, with sharp features and an easy confidence, stopped mid-conversation when he saw her. But Lee Min-jun noticed her. He noticed everything about her. The way she moved behind the catering station, with purpose and grace. The way her brown skin seemed to glow under the soft lights. The way she smiled at guests, warm and genuine, as she explained dishes with obvious passion. She wore a simple dress, but she made it look like art. Like she'd walked off a runway instead of out of a kitchen. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight, in a way that made him forget he was at his friend's wedding and supposed to be paying attention to literally anything else. Min-jun, are you listening? He turned to find Jae-sung, another pilot, and his friend, staring at him with amusement. Sorry, what? Jae-sung followed his gaze and grinned. Ah, the caterer. She's something, isn't she? Who is she? No idea, but if you want to know, maybe you should go talk to her, instead of staring like a creep. Min-jun didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed a plate and joined the line at the catering station, ignoring Jae-sung's laughter behind him. He wasn't even hungry, but he needed to be closer to her, needed to hear her voice, needed to know if she was real or if he'd imagined the way his heart had kicked up when he saw her. The line moved slowly. Min-jun practiced what he'd say. Something charming, but not too forward. Something that would make her smile. Something that wouldn't make him sound like an idiot. Then it was his turn, and she looked up at him, and every planned word disappeared. Her eyes were deep and warm, intelligent and kind, framed by lashes that didn't need mascara. When they met his, something in the air between them shifted, tightened, became electric. For 10 full seconds, Min-jun just stood there, plate in hand, staring at her like a man who'd forgotten how words worked. Sir? Her voice broke the spell, amused and patient. What would you like? It was the second time she'd asked. He hadn't heard the first. He cleared his throat, feeling heat crawl up his neck. Professional. He was a decorated pilot, respected in his field, capable of landing planes in storms. He could talk to a beautiful woman. Everything looks incredible. What do you recommend? Jane smiled, and Min-jun felt it in his bones. First time trying this kind of fusion? First time trying any fusion this interesting. Well then. She picked up a serving spoon, her movements elegant. You'll want to start with the fried chicken. It's got a gochujang glaze that'll change your life. Then try the mac and cheese, don't let the kimchi scare you. And definitely save room for the collard greens. You made all of this? Designed the menu, yes. My team and I prepared everything. It's impressive. Try it before you commit to that compliment. He liked her immediately, liked the confidence in her voice, the passion when she talked about her food, the way she looked him directly in the eyes without flinching. Min-jun took his plate and found a table, but the food was secondary to watching her. He saw the way she interacted with guests, professional but warm. The way she corrected her staff with gentle efficiency. The way she tasted a sauce and adjusted it with a pinch of something before sending it back out. She was magnetic. The food was incredible, but that wasn't why he went back for seconds, or why he went back for thirds. Each time, he lingered a little longer. Asked her about ingredients, about her inspiration, about anything that would keep her talking to him. "You're very curious about food for someone who's at a wedding," she said on his third visit, and there was teasing in her voice. "I'm curious about good food made by talented people. Flattery won't get you extra portions. What will it get me?" She laughed, and the sound did things to his pulse he wasn't prepared for. "Points for effort. I'll take it." Jane was trying very hard not to notice how handsome he was. She'd seen handsome men before, Seoul was full of them, but there was something different about this one. The way he looked at her, as if every beautiful thing he'd ever dreamed of was standing right in front of him. The way he asked questions like her answers actually mattered. The way his whole face transformed when he smiled. "Stop it," she told herself. He's just being polite. He's probably married, or engaged, or at the very least, not interested in a single mother with a catering business and stretch marks. But when she looked up and caught him watching her from across the room, when their eyes met and held for a beat too long to be accidental, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. The reception wound down slowly. Guests filtered out. The bride and groom left in a shower of flower petals, and Jane's staff began the careful work of packing up. She sent them home early, preferring to do the final walkthrough herself, and poured herself a glass of wine from the open bar. She found a quiet corner and sat, letting the exhaustion of the day settle into her bones. It had been a good event. Great, even. The guests had asked for business cards, and she'd handed out at least 20. This was success. This was what she'd built. So why did she feel lonely? "Mind if I join you?" Jane looked up, and there he was, the curious man from the catering line, holding 2 glasses of champagne and wearing a smile that was nervous and charming in equal measure. She should say no. She should thank him politely and go home. She had an early morning tomorrow, and Naya would be awake at dawn, regardless of when Jane went to bed. "Please," she heard herself say instead, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. He sat, handed her one of the champagne glasses, and for a moment, they just sat in comfortable silence. "I'm Min-jun," he said finally. "Lee Min-jun." Jane Meeks." The food was exceptional, Jane. Truly. I've been to a lot of weddings, and I've never had anything like that. Thank you. That's kind of you to say. I'm not being kind. I'm being honest. The flavors, the combinations, the risk of it. You're talented. You know food? I know enough to recognize when someone's doing something special." He paused, took a sip of champagne. "How did you end up in Seoul?" "Long story. I've got time." And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. So she told him. About leaving Atlanta pregnant and alone. About choosing Seoul on a whim. About starting her business from nothing and building it into something she was proud of. Min-jun listened like listening was an art form, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention, laughing at the right moments, his eyes never leaving her face. "That's brave," he said when she finished. "Starting over in a foreign country alone. It didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. Brave things usually do." Then it was his turn. He told her about being a pilot, about the freedom of being above the clouds and the loneliness of hotel rooms in foreign cities. "I love what I do," he said, and she could hear the truth in it. But sometimes I wonder what I'm flying home to. An empty apartment. Silence. Leftover takeout in the fridge that's probably expired. That does sound lonely. It was, he said, and the way he looked at her made her pulse skip. Before tonight. The air between them changed, charged with something Jane hadn't felt in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it was called. Want. Interest. The beginning of something that could be dangerous if she let it. They talked for hours. About soul, about food, about the small joys and large fears that made up a life. They debated the best neighborhood for street food, discovered they both loved old movies and terrible puns and the specific magic of Soul at night. Before Jane realized it, they were the last two people in the venue. I should go, Jane said reluctantly, checking her phone and wincing at the time. Early morning tomorrow. Let me walk you to your car. It wasn't far, just across the parking lot, but Min Jun walked slowly like he was trying to stretch the moment. At her van, he stopped and pulled out a business card. I know this might be forward, he said, and for the first time all night he looked uncertain. But I'd really like to see you again. Would you have dinner with me? Somewhere you don't have to cook? Jane took the card, her fingers brushing his, and felt a spark that had nothing to do with static. I'd like that. His smile could have powered the whole city. Yeah? Yeah. I'll call you tomorrow? I'll be waiting. She got in her van, and he waited until she'd started the engine before he walked away. Jane watched him in her rearview mirror, tall and confident, and somehow both exciting and safe at the same time. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and replayed moments. The way he'd looked at her across the table, the sound of his laugh, the careful way he'd asked for another date, like her answer actually mattered. By the time Jane pulled into her apartment complex, her cheeks hurt from smiling at nothing. She floated into her apartment to find Naya asleep on the couch, the babysitter reading on her phone. After paying the sitter and carrying Naya to bed, Jane sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea and let herself feel something she'd almost given up on. Hope. The next morning, Naya was full of questions from the moment she woke up. How was the wedding, Mommy? Was the food good? Did people like it? Did anyone ask for your card? It was great, baby. People loved the food. Did you meet anyone interesting? Jane tried to keep her face neutral, but Naya was too observant. Why are you smiling like that? I'm not smiling. You are. You're doing the smile you do when you taste something good. Who did you meet? Just a nice man. A pilot. Naya's eyes went huge. A pilot? Like in airplanes. Yes, like in airplanes. Is he handsome? Naya. Is he nice? Does he like you? Are you going to see him again? Maybe. He asked me to dinner. Naya actually shrieked, launching herself at Jane with enough force to make her stumble. Mommy, this is it. This could be my daddy. Sweetheart, slow down. It's just dinner. These things take time. But Naya wasn't listening. She was already planning, already hoping, already imagining a future that Jane was terrified to let herself want. Over the next week, Jane and Min Jun texted constantly. Good morning messages that made her smile, photos of sunrises he saw from the cockpit, late-night conversations when he was in hotel rooms in Tokyo or Singapore and couldn't sleep. He asked about her day, about Naya, about her dreams for her business. He sent her terrible food puns that made her laugh despite herself. He was attentive without being overwhelming, interested without being pushy. Naya demanded updates constantly. Jane showed her Min Jun's social media, photos of him in his pilot uniform, looking professional and handsome. He's perfect, Mommy, Naya said seriously, studying his photos like she was conducting an investigation. He has a nice smile. You told me once never to trust someone who doesn't smile with their eyes. He smiles with his eyes. Look! Naya pointed at the screen. That means he's nice on the inside, too. Sweetheart, he's not your daddy yet. But he could be, right? If the date goes well? These things take time, baby. But it's possible? Jane looked at her daughter's hopeful face and couldn't bring herself to crush it. It's possible. The day of the date arrived with chaos that was somehow both stressful and wonderful. Naya insisted on being involved in every decision. She pulled dresses from Jane's closet with serious concentration, vetoing options with the authority of a seasoned stylist. Not that one. Too boring. Not that one. Wrong color. This one, Mommy. Definitely this one. When Jane was finally ready, dressed in a simple but elegant dress that hugged her curves in all the right ways, Naya wrapped her arms around her waist. He's going to think you're the prettiest person in the whole world, she whispered. And he's going to be right. Min-jun was already at the restaurant when Jane arrived, standing when he saw her approach, his face doing that thing it had done at the wedding when he first saw her. Like she'd knocked the air out of him. He handed her a single rose, red and perfect, and pulled out her chair. You look beautiful. Thank you. You clean up nice yourself. I try. They ordered wine, shared appetizers, fell into conversation, as easy as breathing. The restaurant was nice but not pretentious, the kind of place where you could actually talk without shouting over music. Min-jun asked her about her week, about a difficult client she'd mentioned, about Naya's upcoming school recital. He remembered details from their texts, small things she'd mentioned in passing that he'd tucked away and brought up now. Tell me about Naya, he said over dinner. You light up every time you mention her. Jane pulled out her phone, showed him her favorite photo. Naya grinning at the camera, missing one front tooth, her hair in two puffballs that defied gravity. She's beautiful, Min-jun said softly. She looks like you. She's my whole world. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. I can hear the pride in your voice. She's been asking for a father. The words came out before Jane could stop them, vulnerable and raw. It's been hard, you know, doing it alone, trying to be enough for her when I know she wants more. You're doing an incredible job. She's lucky to have you. Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough. You are, Min-jun said, with such certainty that Jane almost believed him. Trust me, you are. He told her about his own family, about the pressure of being the eldest son, the expectations that came with the uniform he wore. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, safe, stable, respectable, but I wanted to fly. Rebel. Hardly, but it was my rebellion. Small, but mine. They stayed until closing time. Min-jun paid despite Jane's protests, walked her to her car with his hand at the small of her back, a touch that was both gentlemanly and possessive. At her car, he pulled out a small gift bag. I got something for Naya. I hope that's okay. Jane looked inside and found a small stuffed airplane. Her throat tightened. Min-jun, you didn't have to. I wanted to. Tell her I can't wait to meet her. Thank you. She's going to love this. I'll call you tomorrow. I'll be waiting. He waited until she drove away before leaving. When Jane got home, Naya was still awake, waiting on the couch with the babysitter. The moment Jane walked in, Naya rushed to her with wide, hopeful eyes. Mommy, how was it? Jane handed her the stuffed airplane. He got this for you. Naya clutched the airplane to her chest, her eyes huge. Mommy, he got me a present? He really likes us. He does seem to. Do you like him, Mommy? Jane thought about Min-jun's smile, his laugh, the way he listened like every word mattered, the way he looked at her like she was precious and exciting all at once. Yes, baby, I really do. Naya threw her arms around Jane's neck. I knew it. I knew we'd find the right one. I knew we just had to keep looking. They curled up together in Jane's bed, Naya clutching her airplane. For tonight, wrapped around her daughter, Jane let herself believe in happy endings. And as sleep pulled them both under, they dreamed of a future that felt possible for the first time in years. So, dear besties, look at them. Mother and daughter wrapped up in hope, dreaming about a future with this man who gave them a stuffed airplane and promises of tomorrow. Naya's already planned out her whole life with her new daddy. Jane's letting her guard down for the first time in years. Everything is perfect. Everything is beautiful. Everything is about to shatter into a million pieces because Min-jun is about to disappear. And when I tell you the silence is going to destroy them both, I mean it will cut deep. Are you ready for that kind of heartbreak? Let's go. The next day, Jane woke up smiling. She made breakfast humming to herself, checked her phone more times than she wanted to admit, and caught herself daydreaming while pouring Naya's orange juice. Min-jun had said he'd call. He'd promised. Naya noticed immediately. You're happy, Mommy. I am, baby. Because of the pilot? Maybe. Is he going to be my daddy? Naya, we talked about this. It takes time. But he likes you, and he got me a present. That means he likes me too, right? Jane kissed the top of her daughter's head, unwilling to crush the hope in her voice. Right. The call didn't come that morning. Jane told herself he was probably flying, probably busy. Pilots had demanding schedules. She knew that. He'd call when he landed. By evening, her phone stayed silent. By the next day, the smile had faded. On the third day, Jane broke. She called him. The phone rang twice and went to voicemail. His voice, warm and professional, asking her to leave a message. Hey, it's Jane. Just wanted to say hi. Call me when you get a chance. She kept her voice light, casual, like her heart wasn't picking up speed with anxiety. He didn't call back. She tried again the next day. Voicemail again. This time, she didn't leave a message. By the end of the week, Jane had called 4 times and sent 3 text messages. All went unanswered. The messages showed as delivered, but never read. Something was wrong. Something had to be wrong. People didn't just disappear like this. Not after a date that perfect. Not after looking at someone the way Min-jun had looked at her. Jane replayed their entire evening in her head, searching for the moment she'd ruined it. Had she talked too much about Naya? Had she come across as too available, too desperate? Had he seen through her carefully constructed confidence to the scared single mother underneath? Or worse, had he simply changed his mind? The thought sat in her chest like a stone. Men did that, she knew. They said pretty things and made promises, and then vanished like smoke when reality set in. When they remembered, she came with complications, with a daughter, with a life that wouldn't bend around their convenience. 2 weeks after their date, Jane stopped calling. She deleted their text thread, unfollowed him on social media, tried to pretend that one perfect night had never happened. It didn't work. Naya asked about him constantly those first few weeks. When is the pilot coming over? Can we invite him for dinner? Does he want to see my school project? Each question was a knife Jane had to smile through. He's very busy, sweetheart. Pilots travel a lot. But he's coming back, right? He promised to meet me. Baby, sometimes adults make promises they can't keep. That's lying. You told me lying is bad. Jane had no answer for that. 3 weeks after the date, Naya climbed into Jane's lap while she was reviewing invoices at the kitchen table. Her small arms wrapped around Jane's neck, and she pressed her face into her mother's shoulder. Mommy, what happened to the pilot? Jane set down her pen, her throat tight. He's been very busy, sweetheart. He doesn't call anymore? No. Why not? I don't know, Naya. There was a long pause. Then, so quietly, Jane almost missed it. Did I do something wrong? Is that why he doesn't want to be my daddy? Jane's heart shattered. She turned Naya around, cupping her face with both hands. No, baby. No. This has nothing to do with you. You're perfect. You're wonderful. Any man would be lucky to be your father. Then why doesn't he want us? I don't know. But it's not your fault. It's never your fault. Naya's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mommy. I thought he was the one. I really thought he was the one. Me too, baby, Jane whispered, pulling her daughter close. Me too. That night, after Naya fell asleep, clutching her stuffed airplane, Jane sat in her dark kitchen and cried. Not the pretty kind of crying from movies, but the ugly, gut-wrenching kind that left her gasping. She cried for herself, for her daughter, for the dream that had felt so real she could taste it. She cried for the way Min Jun had looked at her like she was magic, for the sound of his laugh, for the future she'd let herself imagine for one stupid, reckless moment. And then she dried her eyes, washed her face, and decided she was done hoping. The weeks bled into months. Jane threw herself into work with renewed intensity. She took on more clients, perfected new recipes, expanded her menu. Soul and Soul Catering became busier than ever, and if Jane worked late into the night and fell into bed too exhausted to think, well, that was just good business. She stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes, stopped refreshing Min Jun's social media to see if he'd posted, stopped analyzing every moment of their date for clues about what she'd done wrong. She built her walls back up, higher and thicker than before. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and Naya was asleep and Jane's defenses were down, she still thought about him, about the gentle pressure of his hand at her back, about the promise in his voice when he'd said he'd call. 5 months passed like a wound that wouldn't quite heal. In the 6th month, Jane's mother was heading back to America after spending a month in Seoul with her daughter and granddaughter. At the airport, Jane and Naya accompanied Clara through the departure hall, stopping only when they reached the security checkpoint. You need to get out more, baby, Clara said, cupping Jane's face. You deserve someone who sees how special you are. Jane thought about Min Jun. Then she thought about the silence that followed, and her jaw tightened. I'm fine, Mama. We're fine. Clara didn't look convinced, but she let it go. She pulled Naya into a tight hug. You take care of your mama. You hear me? I will, Grandma. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, sweet girl. They waved until Clara disappeared through security, and then Jane took Naya's hand. Come on, baby. Let's go home. They were halfway across the terminal when Naya stopped walking. Jane tugged her hand gently. Naya, come on. But Naya wasn't moving. She was staring across the crowded terminal, her small body rigid, her eyes locked on something Jane couldn't see. Baby, what's wrong? Naya didn't answer. She was focused on a figure in a pilot's uniform, walking through the arrival area, rolling a black suitcase behind him, his flight crew dispersing around him. Jane followed her daughter's gaze, and her entire world tilted. Min Jun? He looked exactly the same. Tall, handsome, moving with that easy confidence she remembered. His uniform was crisp, his hair slightly mussed from the flight, and he looked healthy. Whole. Very much alive. Which meant everything she'd told herself, every excuse she'd made for him, was a lie. He hadn't been in an accident, hadn't been sick, hadn't lost her number or had his phone stolen, or any of the 100 scenarios she'd invented to explain the silence. He'd simply chosen not to call. Before Jane could process this, before she could grab Naya's hand and drag them both out of the airport, Naya moved. She dropped Jane's hand and ran. Naya! Jane's voice was sharp with panic. Naya, wait! But Naya was fast and determined and angry. She weaved through travelers with single-minded purpose, her eyes locked on Min-jun. She skidded to a stop directly in front of him. Min-jun was exhausted. It had been a long flight. He didn't notice the child until she was standing right in front of him, one small hand on her hip, the other pointing directly at his chest. He stopped, startled, looking down at this tiny, serious-faced girl who was glaring at him like he'd personally offended her. "Excuse me," Naya said, her voice loud enough to carry. "You're the man who ghosted my mom after the first date." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, delivered with the confidence of a judge reading a verdict. The noise of the terminal seemed to fade. Travelers slowed, turned, suddenly interested in this small drama unfolding. Min-jun felt the air leave his lungs. He stared at this child, at her fierce eyes and determined jaw, and recognition slammed into him like a fist. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. He crouched down to her level, his heart pounding. "You're Naya?" "Yes." Her chin lifted. "And you're Min-jun, the one who made my mommy cry." The words hit him like a physical blow. Around them, people were definitely watching now, but Min-jun couldn't focus on anything except this brave little girl who was trembling with anger and hurt. "Naya, please, I can explain." "No." Naya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "I remember your face. You gave me the airplane. You said you wanted to meet me. You made my mommy smile." Min-jun's throat tightened. "Naya." "She waited for you to call." Naya's voice shook, but didn't break. "She kept checking her phone. Every day. She tried to call you. She left messages. And you never answered. Not once. I know. I'm so sorry. She cried because of you." The tears were falling now, streaming down Naya's cheeks. Min-jun felt his own eyes burning. "I thought you were different." Naya's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow hurt more than shouting. "I thought you were going to be my daddy. I thought you really liked us." "Naya, please." "But you left." The tears were coming harder now. "Just like my first daddy left. You hurt her even more than he did, because she trusted you. Because you made her hope." Min-jun reached for her, but stopped, his hands hanging useless in the air. "I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to hurt either of you." "Then why did you?" Naya's voice broke on a sob. "Why didn't you call? Why didn't you answer her messages? Why did you make promises you didn't keep?" "Naya!" Min-jun looked up, and there she was. Jane. She was frozen about 10 feet away, her face showing shock and pain, and something that looked like betrayal. She was staring at him like he was a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. Like he was someone who'd hurt her. Their eyes met, and Min-jun felt the ground drop out from under him. He'd thought about this moment for months, imagined what he'd say, how he'd explain. But now, faced with the reality of her, with the hurt in her eyes and the protective fury in her posture, every practiced word disappeared. "Jane," he managed, standing slowly. "Jane, please." But she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was moving toward Naya, her heels clicking sharply against the airport floor. She reached her daughter and placed a protective hand on Naya's shoulder. "I am so sorry," Jane said to the crowd that had gathered, her voice controlled and pleasant and completely hollow. "My daughter has a very active imagination. We're leaving now." She didn't look at Min-jun, couldn't look at him. "Mommy? But it's him," Naya said, her voice thick with tears. "It's really him?" "I know, baby, come on. But he needs to explain. He needs to tell us why." "Naya." Jane's voice was firm now, the tone that meant no arguments. "We're leaving." She turned, steering Naya away, and Min Jun felt panic claw at his chest. He watched them disappear into the crowd, watched Jane's straight back and Naya's tear-stained face looking over her shoulder at him, and felt everything he'd been trying to protect, everything he'd been too afraid to reach for, slip through his fingers. Around him, the airport resumed its normal rhythm. People moved on, the show over. But Min Jun stood frozen, his heart hammering, his mind racing. That was them. That was Jane and Naya, the two people who'd haunted his dreams for 6 months, and he'd just let them walk away. Again. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. He pulled it out and scrolled to Jane's contact, the one he'd looked at 1,000 times without pressing call. His finger hovered over the button. But what would he say? How could he explain 6 months of silence in a phone call? How could he make her understand that every day he'd wanted to reach out, every day he'd thought about her, but the fear had been stronger than the want? He'd survived a stabbing, survived surgery and recovery, and months of therapy. He'd conquered panic attacks and nightmares, and the crippling fear that came with PTSD, but he couldn't pick up the phone and call the woman he was falling for. What did that say about him? Min Jun stood in the middle of the, still in his uniform, surrounded by strangers, and made a decision. He'd lost Jane once through silence and fear. He wasn't losing her again. He remembered her telling him about her business. He could find her. He could explain. He could beg if he had to. He just needed her to listen. 3 days later, Min Jun stood outside Seoul and Seoul Catering as the sun set over Seoul. Through the window, he could see Jane directing her staff, clipboard in hand, every bit the boss. She looked fierce and focused, and so beautiful his chest ached. He'd practiced what he'd say 100 times. But when she looked up and saw him through the window, when her entire body went rigid and her face went carefully blank, all his words evaporated. Jane said something to her staff, set down her clipboard, and walked outside. She didn't smile, didn't soften, just stood in front of him with her arms crossed, a wall of ice and hurt. "What are you doing here, Min Jun?" Her voice was cold, controlled, nothing like the warmth he remembered. "Jane, I need to talk to you. Now you want to talk?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. 6 months later, now you want to talk. I know how this looks. Do you?" Her eyes flashed. "Do you have any idea what the last 6 months have been like? Do you know what it's like to wait for someone who never calls? To wonder what you did wrong? To have to explain to your 7-year-old daughter why the man who promised to be different turned out to be exactly the same as every other man who's walked away? Jane, please, if you'd just let me explain." "Explain what? That you're a coward? I don't need an explanation for that, Min Jun. I've lived that story before." The words stung, but he deserved them. "It's not like that. Something happened." "I don't want to hear it." Her voice cracked just slightly, and that crack was worse than her anger. "I don't want your excuses or your apologies or whatever you think is going to make this better. Jane, no." She stepped back, putting distance between them. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up here after 6 months of silence and expect me to just listen. I have a business to run. I have a daughter waiting at home. I have a life that I've built without you. Jane, please, if you'd just let me explain." "Explain what? That you're a coward? I don't need an explanation for that. I've lived that story before." The words stung, but he deserved them. "It's not like that. Something happened." "I don't want to hear it." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Jane, please." And there it was again, that crack in her armor, the hurt bleeding through. "Just go." She turned and walked back inside, back to her staff and her work and her carefully controlled life. Min Jun stood on the street watching her through the window and knew he'd just made everything worse. But he wasn't giving up. Not on her. Not on them. Not on the future he'd been too scared to fight for. He'd come back. He'd keep coming back until she listened, until she understood that losing her was the biggest mistake of his life. At least this time, he'd fight. Okay, besties, pause for a second, because this decorated pilot who ghosted our girl for 6 months is about to become the most persistent man in Seoul. We're talking rain-soaked wait sessions, little gifts for Naya, and a 7-year-old playing matchmaker like her life depends on it. Jane's walls are fortress-level high right now, but Min-jun's about to show up in ways that'll make you believe in second chances again. If you're already feeling the tension, smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and buckle up, because what happens when he finally gets her to listen will have you holding your breath. Now, let's see how a broken man fights for the woman he never stopped loving. 2 days later, Min-jun came back. Jane saw him through the window again, standing in the early evening light. This time, Naya was with her. School had finished early, and Jane hadn't wanted to leave her alone, so she'd brought her to the kitchen where Naya sat doing homework. When Min-jun appeared at the door, Naya spotted him first. She tugged Jane's sleeve. "Mommy, he's here again!" Jane's jaw tightened. "Naya, stay close to me." But when Jane got pulled away by an employee, Naya slipped away and appeared behind Min-jun. She tapped his leg. He turned, looked down, and crouched to her level immediately. "Hi, Naya. Why are you here again?" "I came to talk to your mom." "She doesn't want to talk to you." Naya sat on the step, patting the spot next to her. "Sit." Min-jun sat. "Why did you leave?" "I didn't want to. Something bad happened to me. Someone hurt me very badly. I had to go to the hospital for a long time." Naya's eyes widened. "You were in the hospital?" "Yes, for a few months." "Is that why you didn't call my mommy?" "Yes, I couldn't, and when I finally could, I thought she'd moved on." "That's dumb. My mommy doesn't move on from people. She's loyal. She hoped you'd call every single day." Min-jun's throat tightened. "I thought about you both, every day." "Did you really like my mommy?" "I really liked her. I still do, more than I can explain." "Then you have to make her happy again. She's been sad for too long." "I will. I promise." Promises are important. If you break too many, there's nothing left to hold on to. You're very wise for 7. "I know." Then quieter. "Will you hurt her again?" Min-jun met her gaze steadily. "I will do everything in my power to never hurt her again. I'll always be honest with her. I'll always show up. And I'll never disappear again." Naya stood up, brushing off her skirt. "Okay, but if you make her cry again, I'll be really mad at you." "That's fair." "Naya!" Jane stood in the doorway, panic and anger on her face. "What did I tell you about staying close?" "Sorry, Mommy. But listen, Min-jun was in the hospital. That's why he didn't call." Jane's face went pale. Her eyes darted to Min-jun. "He didn't mean to ghost you, Mommy. He couldn't call." "Naya, sweetheart. Mommy, please, just listen to him." Jane looked at her daughter's pleading face, then at Min-jun. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Not now. I need time to think." "Okay," Min-jun said softly. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." He came back every few days. He didn't push, didn't demand. Sometimes he brought small gifts for Naya. Sometimes he just stood outside and waited. Jane watched from inside, her walls developing cracks. "That pilot's really persistent," Soo-jin commented one evening. "People don't stand in the rain for someone they don't care about." Jane looked out the window. Min-jun was there again, and when their eyes met, he didn't look away. After a week and a half, Jane finally broke. She walked outside and stood in front of him. One conversation. That's all you get. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. Tomorrow. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here. 7 o'clock. I'll be there. If you don't show up, if you disappear again, that's it. We're done. I'll be there. I promise. The next evening, Jane sat in the cafe with tea she wasn't drinking. When Min-jun walked in exactly at 7, she felt something shift in her chest. He sat across from her. Okay, I'm listening. Min-jun took a deep breath. That night we had dinner. I went home thinking about our future. I'd never felt that way about anyone before. Jane's hands tightened around her cup. The next day, my ex-girlfriend showed up at my apartment. We'd broken up over a year before I met you. It wasn't a good relationship. She was controlling, unpredictable. But I thought it was over. I thought she'd moved on. What happened? Min-jun's hands clenched on the table. She came with 2 men I'd never seen before. They forced their way into my apartment, smashed my television, destroyed my laptop and my phone. Broke things I'd had for years. I tried to stop them, tried to physically remove them. And that's when she stabbed me. Jane's hand flew to her mouth. She had a knife. I didn't even see it until I felt it go in, right here. He touched his side, just below his ribs. I remember falling. I remember thinking this was it. I was going to die in my apartment over a woman I didn't even love anymore. But my neighbors heard the noise. They called the police and an ambulance. Tears were already streaming down Jane's face. I was in surgery for 6 hours. The knife had nicked an artery. I lost so much blood they weren't sure I'd make it. When I woke up, I was told I was lucky to be alive. His voice was steady, but his eyes were bright. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital, then another month recovering at my parents' house because I couldn't take care of myself. Min-jun, I had no idea. How could you? I never told you. I never reached out. He leaned forward. And even after I was physically healed, I wasn't okay. I had nightmares every night. Panic attacks during the day. Loud noises made me freeze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. The doctor said it was PTSD. Jane was crying openly now. By the time I was truly okay, it had been almost 5 months. I wanted to call you every single day. But I convinced myself you'd moved on, that you'd found someone better, someone who wouldn't bring all this darkness into your life. That wasn't your choice to make. I know. I thought I was protecting you. I thought you deserved better than someone who was broken. You're not broken. You survived something terrible. I went back to work last month, tried to forget about you, but I couldn't. Then I saw you at the airport and realized what an idiot I'd been. His voice cracked. You weren't better off without me. You were hurting because of me, and so was Naya. I thought you just didn't want us. Never. God, Jane, never. He stopped just short of touching her hand. That night with you was the first time in years I felt alive. You made me want things I'd given up on. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? Because I was a coward. Because I was scared. Because I'd spent months learning to cope with trauma, and I didn't know how to also cope with the possibility of losing you. They sat in silence, both crying, the weight of 6 months pressing down on them. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know the truth. Jane wiped her eyes. You should have told me. I would have been there for you. I know that now. I'm not fragile. I've survived my own share of pain. I could have handled yours. You're right, and I'm sorry. Jane looked at him, saw the man who'd made her laugh, who'd disappeared, but also the man who'd survived trauma and stood in the rain, waiting for a chance to explain. I can't just forgive you and move on. It doesn't work that way. I understand. But maybe we can start slow. Coffee once a week. We talk. We see what happens. Hope bloomed across his face. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. And Min-jun, if you ever shut me out again, if you ever make decisions about us without including me, we're done. I won't. I swear. Forgiveness came in small moments, coffee dates that turned into dinners. Min-jun showing up at Naya's school recital with flowers, late-night phone calls when he couldn't sleep. He was patient when Jane had doubts. They rebuilt trust slowly. Min-jun started having dinner with them once a week, then twice. He took Naya to the park, helped with homework, learned to braid hair. Jane taught him to cook. When he kissed her for the first time in her kitchen, soft and careful, like she was precious, it felt as though his lips had found a place inside her soul she hadn't known was waiting for him. 3 months after their conversation at the cafe, they were officially together. It was different this time, deeper and more intentional. Built on honesty instead of just chemistry. 6 months after their reconciliation, Min-jun had dinner at Jane's apartment. After dinner, Naya fell asleep in his lap during a movie. Min-jun caught Jane looking and mouthed, "I love you." Jane's eyes filled with tears, and she mouthed back, "I love you too." Later, after they'd tucked Naya into bed, they stood in Jane's kitchen. She leaned against his chest, and his arms came around her waist, solid and sure. "I was thinking," Min-jun said softly, "about that little girl at the airport who called me out in front of everyone." Jane laughed. "She's something else. She told me what I'd done wrong, then gave me a chance to make it right. She's extraordinary, like her mother. We're both lucky. No, I'm the lucky one. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. Maybe we both needed second chances." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." 1 year later, Naya stood in front of her 3rd grade class for show and tell, holding a photo of Min-jun in his pilot uniform. "This is my daddy," she announced proudly. "He flies airplanes all over the world. He wasn't always my daddy. He used to be just my mommy's boyfriend. But then I yelled at him in an airport for ghosting my mom, and he explained everything. And now, he's my daddy for real. So I guess yelling at people sometimes works." Her teacher looked amused. That evening, Min-jun picked Naya up from school. She recounted her presentation with dramatic flair, complete with hand gestures. "You told your whole class you yelled at me in an airport?" "Yep. Mrs. Kim said I was very brave." At home, Jane was testing a new recipe. Min-jun told her about show and tell. Jane laughed. "That child is going to give me gray hair. She's perfect." That night, after Naya was asleep, Min-jun led Jane to the balcony. Seoul spread out below them, millions of lights in the darkness. "I was thinking," he said, pulling out a small box. Jane's breath caught. "I know we've only been back together for a year. I know we're still healing, still building something new from broken pieces. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Naya. I want to be there for every show and tell presentation, every business success, every moment big and small." He opened the box. The ring inside was simple and perfect. "Jane Meeks, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, yes." He slid the ring on and kissed her, deep and full of promise. From inside, they heard a shriek. "I knew it! I knew he was going to propose. Can I be the flower girl?" They broke apart, laughing. "Were you spying, Naya?" Naya appeared in her pajamas, grinning. "Maybe. So can I?" "Of course you can," Min-jun said, scooping her up with one arm and pulling Jane close with the other. They stood there, the 3 of them, a family built from second chances, and a 7-year-old who wasn't afraid to call out a pilot in an airport. "I told you we'd find the right daddy," Naya said smugly. "You were right, baby." Min-jun and Jane shared a look over Naya's head, a look that said they were in for a lifetime of this, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Sometimes the best love stories were the ones that broke before they could bend, the ones that required courage and honesty, and a little girl brave enough to demand better. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got a second chance to make it right. If you'd love more stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support truly makes a difference. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you give someone a second chance after 6 months of silence? Do you think Minjun should have reached out from the hospital? Or was he right to wait until he healed? And if you were Naya, would you have confronted him in that airport or stayed quiet? Leave your answers in the comments. I read them all and truly enjoy hearing what you think. Let me know where you're watching from and what kinds of love stories you enjoy. Thank you for walking every painful and beautiful step of Jane, Minjun, and Naya's journey with me. I'll see you in the next story, and trust me, it's one worth staying for. Until then, remember, sometimes love ghosts you, and sometimes love fights its way back. The difference is in who's brave enough to show up.